Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Alexandra DeSanctis of National Review is in for Jim today. As most of you know, Jim is out rubbing elbows with the evil Koch brothers out there in Palm Springs, learning about all the dastardly deeds to bring opportunity to more and more Americans. So we'll find out what nuggets he comes back with. Jim will be back on Wednesday. Alexandra, kind enough to join us today and tomorrow. Alexandra, welcome back.
Thanks, Greg. Good to be with you, as usual.
And, of course, we have good, bad, and crazy martinis. I shouldn't say of course, because we've been all over the map with bads and crazies lately. And, in fact, even last Monday when Alexandra was here, I'm not sure we had the normal format. But today we do. And we're starting with the good, and we go to 60 Minutes for that. The former head of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, is seriously thinking about running for president. And not only that, he's thinking about running for president as an independent. Here's why he says he's seriously considering this.
We're living at a most fragile time. Not only the fact that this president is not qualified to be the president, but the fact that both parties are consistently not doing what's necessary on behalf of the American people and are engaged every single day in revenge politics.
And so you've got a lot of liberals out there freaking out because they think if Schultz, who's pretty left, ends up running as an independent, he's going to siphon away votes from whoever the Democratic nominee is. So you've got people screaming in all caps. Then you've got people like Ian Millhiser, who is always very measured in his reactions to things on Twitter, saying if Howard Schultz gets into the presidential race, move on, indivisible team and the DNC, the major unions and the major presidential campaign should all use their email list to promote a Starbucks boycott until he drops out. Conveniently ignoring the fact that Howard Schultz is no longer in charge of Starbucks. But if they want to go after Starbucks, I guess that's their right. On the other side, you got Donald Trump, who clearly loves this, but is basically trying to bait Schultz into actually doing it. He tweets out earlier today, Howard Schultz doesn't have the guts to run for president. Watched him on 60 Minutes last night, and I agree with him that he's not the smartest person. Besides, America already has that. I only hope that Starbucks is still paying me their rent in Trump Tower. So, Alexandra, all the consultants for Howard Schultz think he would draw evenly from both sides, that Trump's floor could come down to about 26, 27, or 28% of the popular vote. We know that third-party candidates generally don't make that deep of a run. Even Ross Perot failed to win a state. And, oh, by the way, for everyone who thinks that Howard Schultz would necessarily draw from the Democrats, Ross Perot probably hurt George H.W. Bush more than he hurt Bill Clinton. So what do you make of this? How much fun are you having watching the Democrats freak out at the mere possibility of this?
I think that's why it's a great good martini because, just watching the Democrats worry about a run like this reminds me of 2015 and 2016 when people on the right were thinking, if the Republican Party didn't embrace Trump as a possible presidential nominee, maybe he would just drop out and run as an independent and sabotage the whole race and hand it to the left. So I think seeing it in reverse is pretty funny. And I probably wouldn't vote for Howard Schultz myself. I could see him drawing some kind of centrist votes away from Trump. But I think for the most part, those people have already dropped away from Trump and probably would vote for the left if they're going to vote at all. So I don't think his consultants are right that it would necessarily draw evenly from both sides. If I were a Democrat, I'd be pretty worried about this.
So when it comes to not voting for Trump, anybody who doesn't want to vote for Trump, do you think we're at a point now where the animosity toward Trump is so severe that most people are going to vote for the Democrat, no matter how big of a loon on the socialist scale that they might end up being, depending on who gets nominated? Or do you think that there might actually be some on the left who would say, no, that's too far for me. I'll go with this guy in the middle?
I could see some people in the center thinking that any number of the Democratic candidates are too extreme because look at the things that the far left are demanding from their nominee right now or just from any politician in general are so extreme and so unpopular that I think whoever wants to be the nominee is going to feel like they have to pay lip service to that, even if they don't agree with it. And I think in the process, they might scare off some people who don't really want Medicare for all, who, are just generally not aligned with kind of a pro-socialist agenda. And so I guess it would depend on who ends up being the nominee. But whoever it is, I think will have to move pretty far to the left.
So basically we're seeing the Democrats, almost regardless of what Howard Schultz decides to do here, move into that category we see sometimes on social media where folks will say all the Democrats have to do is not be insane, and they can't do it. Is that pretty much where we're headed with this nomination process on the left?
I think so. And I'm dumbfounded by the fact that somehow the left sees Donald Trump as an opportunity to become even more extreme in the other direction. It makes no sense. All both sides have to do is be sane, given how crazy the other one is, and they just keep going.
Neither side can do it sometimes. That's a good point, too. All right, let's move on to our bad martini now, Alexandra. And this is a figure that Jim and I talked about last week, mostly because of our complete inability to pronounce his last name, and why a guy who's not even 40 yet thinks that being the mayor of South Bend is a launching pad to becoming the next president of the United States. You are a proud graduate of the University of Notre Dame, which, of course, is right there in South Bend or adjacent to it. I'm not exactly sure how the jurisdiction is. But anyway, you know South Bend politics much better than the rest of us. And you've written about him before, particularly when he was vying to be the next chairman of the DNC from a more moderate perspective who could potentially appeal to folks in the middle of the country more than a Tom Perez, for example. So what do we need to know about Pete Buttigieg? First of all, how do you say his name? Secondly, what do you think he brings to the race?
It's Pete Buttigieg, which I sadly had to learn when I was at Notre Dame. But I do think I wrote this at the time, and I think now too, Mayor Pete, as we call him, I guess to avoid having to say his last name, is kind of a formidable candidate. And I don't think that he'll get the nomination for the same reason that he didn't win the DNC chair position over Tom Perez. But I think he actually can make a pretty decent case to understand kind of the white working class voter that Donald Trump appealed to. And I think coming from South Bend, that's sort of your quintessential rundown, used to be a car manufacturing town. And now, honestly, if Notre Dame wasn't there, I think it would be, nowheresville, basically. And that's no slam on it, but that's just the way that it is in a lot of middle America. And I think Mayor Pete has come in and kind of revitalized in a lot of ways. I think he is obviously too far left for me. And I think he's a great example of the left kind of pressuring these moderate Democrats to move further to the left on things. He, for example, he vetoed a bill that would have allowed a crisis pregnancy center to open up on the west side of town where it was really needed. And I think on a lot of issues, he's just kind of caved to this overwhelming progressive push on the left. But I do think he's better at explaining kind of how Democrats need to appeal to middle America better.
Talk about what he did to revitalize the town and why you think that might resonate with the working class folks that clearly flocked to Donald Trump last time.
I don't know that it would actually work as kind of a national platform. I think it's worked in South Bend because a Democrat can sort of impose certain policies that will artificially allow more businesses to grow and things like that, which he's done. But I don't think that translates on a bigger scale. And so I think he can point to his record and say, look, we have new businesses opening up and we have more people employed and whatever else. And that is all true. But I don't think that means that, he can go to Youngstown and say the same thing or, be as successful as Donald Trump was if he's going to add this kind of left-wing social package to it as well.
Now, he's not even 40 years old yet. So as Jim said, he might not even be seriously thinking he can win the nomination, but it can certainly raise his national profile. It might get him a book. It might get him a spot as a national news commentator and so forth. So what do you think his long game might be here if he doesn't, in fact, score a major upset and become the nominee?
I think he might be raising a national profile is huge. And for the mayor of South Bend, I think I could easily see him running for Senate. I could see him thinking maybe he could be a kind of top 5 candidate to run as someone's running mate, given that he's from Indiana, maybe could deliver the state. I kind of question whether or not that's true, but I think he's sort of in the same mold as Joe Donnelly, who just lost his senator's race this past November. Just kind of a blue collar Democrat, sort of tries to come across as a moderate a lot of the time. So I wonder if that might be his end game.
Be very interesting to watch. Anything else that folks should know before he hits the campaign trail in earnest?
No, well, he's the first openly gay presidential candidate, or not candidate, primary candidate for president. So that's one for the history books, perhaps. That'll
be his calling card. And I'm sure how the media will refer to him every single time that they refer to him, because they would never focus on the identity politics of the situation. All right, let's move on to our crazy martini now. And if the guys in their 30s don't have a chance, let's talk about the people in their 70s. Joe Biden's still trying to decide what he's doing. Bernie Sanders is getting in. He will be, 79 come Election Day in November of 2020. And now, guess who else might be coming back? Jeff Zeleny on CNN.
So Hillary Clinton is telling people that she's not closing the doors to the idea of running in 2020. Let's just let that sink in. I'm told by 3 people that as recently as this week, she was telling people that, look, given all this news from the indictments, particularly the Roger Stone indictment, she talked to several people saying, look, I'm not closing the doors to this. Now, it does not mean that there's a campaign sort of in waiting or a plan is in the works, but she is still believing that there maybe could be a possibility under the argument of this. I won the popular vote. All of this has sort of vindicated what happened in 2016. So one close friend told me yesterday, it would surprise me greatly if she actually did it. But goes on to add, she is still not closing the doors.
I'd be very surprised if she actually ran, Alexandra. But what do you make of the fact that she is clearly still gritting her teeth over what happened in 2016? And I don't know if she thinks the party owes her another shot at this or that they'd clear the field for her again. But what do you make of all this?
I'm honestly not at all surprised by it, although I am mildly horrified. I feel like part of me would love to see her run again just because she's going to get absolutely trounced. She still remains probably the one person or political figure in America less popular than Donald Trump. I'm not surprised because she and Bill are already trekking around the country doing this speaking tour, and she had no intention of going away. And I think she's kind of been holding this in the back of her mind. And if you look at why she ran in 2016, she got the nomination because she all but told the party, it's my turn. This is mine. I'm entitled to this. And I think she very much still has she won the popular vote. So she has this idea that it was mine. Donald Trump and Russia basically took it away from me.
Yeah. Do you think the Democrats are interested in having her back in the fold, though?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the Hillary Clinton constituency is, maybe 20-year age range of white women, and that's about it.
So she probably won't run then. How does the party treat her? Is she just an afterthought? Your time has passed? Or will she get some sort of deference if she were actually to jump into this thing?
I don't know. I have to imagine that someone will be able to talk her out of it and convince her that she won't be able to win, and it's better to try and save face. But I did see someone make the comment recently, I wonder how Hillary Clinton feels about the fact that her endorsement in the race will be, honestly, no one will want it. They'll be running from it. Meanwhile, they all want the endorsement of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, that just shows you the shift in the party, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And there were a lot of people thinking Bernie wouldn't run because he'd be too old, and they were kind of groveling at his feet for his blessing and his endorsement. But they're not going to get it, at least not yet, since he's planning on running himself here. But this rumor popped up a while ago, and while we think I think Jim and I both agree with you on this, that the Democrats just aren't interested in her anymore. If this is a 20-person field, we got a Republican nominee from a 17-person field a couple of years ago that nobody expected and probably became the nominee because of the massive field, or at least in part. Could she actually finagle a way out of here with that 20-year cross-section of white women when there's so many other people running?
I suppose it's possible, but I have to think if someone like, say, Joe Biden got in the race, her odds would go a lot down because he'd be kind of fit the similar mold of an establishment candidate, someone who is obviously vice president, so has more the stamp of approval there, can kind of ally himself with Obama in a better way than she can, and would appeal to probably about the same block plus a little bit more.
Fascinating. The week's just getting started, Alexandra. Fun times.
Lots to come, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thanks as always for being with us. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Bye, Greg.
Alexandra DeSanctis of National Review in for Jim Garrity today. She'll be back with us again tomorrow. Jim will be back Wednesday. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Tune in again Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.